Let me run through stop, drop, and roll pretty quick. Stop, drop, and roll is a way to remember how to frame a message kind of in a step-by-step process. So the first step is stop. In the stop phase, you want to stop and analyze what's going on. You want to see what is it that the conservatives are saying. Get their messages down as best you can. Then see if you can divine the frames out of those messages. You want to know what frame there is. And the example we've used over and over is immigration, where there's the crime frame we hear from the conservatives, and there's the refugee frame that we could use. So you want to figure out what frame they're in because you don't want to be in it. So it's nice to know what it is. Look for code words. So you'll hear code words now and then. Tax relief is one of them, but you know, there are code words and dog whistles all the time. It's good to identify those. Then identify the real issue. What I mean by that is that quite often what the conservative message is designed to kind of switch the issue to kind of move out of what the real issue is and get into it. It prevents you from talking about the real issue because we've talked about it before. Frames as stories constrain the conversation. So you want to find out what that story is so you can stay out of it. And then there's the drop phase. And in drop, we need to unlearn bad habits. We do all sorts of things that aren't very helpful. We're not aware of them, and I get that. So we want to try to unlearn those. And I'll use this example here. And I'm using the example of I support curbing emissions because 97% of scientists agree that climate change is real. And there are a number of things wrong with this, and we'll talk about those as I move to the next one. So first off, we're kind of in the facts and logic realm. In the facts and logic realm, that's kind of cool, but it's unfortunately not people's default position. Most people are not in the what Daniel Kahneman calls slow thinking mode because it takes a lot more energy. It literally takes more brain energy. Your brain uses more energy when you are in a logical mode. And you know, some of you may have friends, you know, you're at a party and you're hauled off into a corner and given a lesson in Western European history. It's not really what you want to do at a party. It's kind of not what you want to do if you have 1 minute or 2 minutes at the door. Then you want to avoid debunking, not because that should never be done. None of these are prohibitions, but you want to avoid debunking because when you do that, you're generally in their frames and you want to stay out of those frames. As I mentioned, don't use conservative frames or code words, and that's really important. It's very easy to get sucked into responding to what your opponent is saying, and a lot of times that is meant to pull you off. Also, don't forget your own message. We respond way too much. We need to just think about what our message is. I think we all looked at that Nancy Pelosi video. You can see her. She knew what she wanted to say. And you see this every time she's on TV now. She says what she wants to say, and it doesn't matter what the reporters are saying. She's going to say her message, and that's the deal. And don't take the bait. As I said, conservatives will try to bait you with really absurd things so that you spend time thinking about the absurd thing they said. And you're not watching what they're really doing. And then in the role phase, what is your issue or goal? So you do want to identify that real issue. What do you really want to talk about? And by goal, I kind of mean, you know, who are you talking to and what do you want them to understand when you finish with your message? That's the what. How do you accomplish that? Basically, it's an action. So if you want to stop frack sanding in your Wisconsin county, then you would want to have a Wisconsin House Bill number 459, stop frack sanding. That's your how. And then why do you care? Those are your values. And we usually do those in that order. In fact, most of the time we never get the why do you care. And so not just facts and logic, way too focused on what's happening and not anything about why we care. And then frame message. I'll give you a quick example here. Strong public schools empower every student to be well prepared for success in work, home, and community life. Another one is our first duty as citizens is to protect one another. Common sense background checks for all gun purchases is the responsible thing to do. So in both of those, we used, like, for example, public schools. This goes back to our value of public investment for private success. Empowerment, which is a very core liberal value. Success is a value, and community is a value. We value the idea that we are part of a community, and we all need to be working together to make sure the community is well, not just ourselves. And likewise, for the second sentence, we have duty and protect, common sense, and responsible. So those are good value frames. Again, you can download this list of our truckload of values. This slide is changed a little. The newest list is a little bit more up to date, but this gives you an idea of core values of liberals. And the list there is real good. In the workshops, we hand out the business card because you can keep that in your wallet and pull it out. And it's got all of these on there, plus a little stop, drop, and roll reminder on the back. But you can also print the values out. It's also way easier than facts and logic. And again, anybody can have a values conversation because all politics is moral and everybody can talk about what's right and wrong.
Doing that, did anybody start like trying to create a message or anything that they'd like to work through tonight?
Really fast is going to be the line 3. Okay, you have to refile the appeal by Wednesday.
What is it?
Line 3?
Line 3?
And
Yeah.
it's a tar sands pipeline that's coming through Minnesota.
Okay.
Right, and if we want to stop it, we have to, Governor Walz has to put the appeal in, and he has to do it by Wednesday. So, I mean, this is really a now thing.
Would you want to try crafting a message around that we could all send to him?
Can you help me, Fred?
Now I know why you asked me to join you here.
No, I just really thought of this one right now. But anyway, Fred and I have been on this issue before.
I will give you one example of a frame related to line 3 because the Sierra Club sent out an email, and you call a number and they give you a little prep ahead of time. In that prep, they said that line 3 will emit 708 gigatons of carbon every day. It was 708, million barrels, whatever it was.
Excuse me, but isn't that getting into what George said to avoid?
Yes, I'm giving you that as an example of what not to do, because I don't know what a gigaton is.
Right.
But if I reframed it and said, putting in line 3 is the equivalent of putting in 40 black belching coal plants into our state, one for every major town and city across our area. Do we want that pollution? Do we want to be able to breathe in that pollution? I'd be framing it different than the gigaton argument. I'd also be letting them defend coal plants, which are on the way out. So it's an example of a slight frame there. But I think your thing, you're asking for something different, a frame on.
Well, that what
Governor Walz due in a couple of days.
I just unmuted myself.
Yeah, because what you said, Hobie, that when we talked about this, I think last week, or it's about like the use of story and the use of visuals rather than the facts and logic. So by saying that's the equivalent of 40 belching coal plants, or however you said that, it's like you get a visual, and then the visual is not pretty. Nobody wants that. Right.
And let me make a distinction between value frames and just framing in general. You know, you can the immigration frame we were talking about refugees. That refugee is not a value frame. But it's another frame, just like Hobie's talking about here. And Hobie's always been very good at using images and painting pictures for people, and because that you get that picture of belching smoke plants in your mind, and that's hard to get out, and all of a sudden you start to think about how bad that is, and that it's a very I don't want to say advanced, but it is kind of an advanced way to be framing, where you're not literally saying the values you have. You're evoking or saying exactly what's happening. You're evoking an image in somebody's brain that will set off other things in their head. Nobody wants a smoking plant, belching fumes into the air. And thinking of that already, they're in a thing where there's kind of a protection frame. You feel like you need to be protected from that, and that is evoked by that image.
So in the 3 days till Wednesday, I'm sorry to jump in again, Malia, who is the audience for the message you want to deliver? Is it Governor Walz?
Yes, this would just be Walz. I made my phone call this morning, okay, and I probably used the Sierra message, and part of it was the treaty rights that would be broken, the fact that we don't need this anymore because we put the volume of oil up into the 60s, and that's regressive. We want to be progressive with solar and new forms of energy. So this isn't needed.
Those are reasons to me. I'm listening to reasons. But if I were calling Governor Walz, I would be asking him to have the courage to follow the law, as an example.
Okay.
And as a result, get my support. It's somewhat transactional, but you have to make the decision for what you want be the motivator for him taking a courageous, I'm using that only as an example. There's a dozen other things we could do, but it might be take the courageous stand and protect Minnesota by following the law. And it appeals to both sides then, because the law aspect is a conservative value, and yet, protection is also a conservative value here. And I think he needs more protection amongst conservatives in greater Minnesota than he does from progressives and liberals.
That was going to be my question, and forgive me for not knowing that much about this issue, but why is line 3 even being considered? Is it like for jobs? Is it for, what is the other side's reason for wanting this?
Jobs and safety.
Safety?
Yeah, there are a couple of them. I don't want to talk over anybody, sorry.
Yeah, it's safer to use a pipeline to transport, it's a false choice. It's safer to use a pipeline to transfer oil than it is a rail line. And that's a false choice because we get past the question of whether we need a pipeline at all.
Okay.
But the jobs thing, my favorite, if I can, sorry to go off on this, George, I gave testimony in front of the administrative line judge, and there were 50 guys wearing yellow t-shirts that said Union 49 on them. And afterward, and they were all pro-pipeline. And after that, after I gave my testimony, I went over and introduced myself to their leader. I mean, how much damage could I do, right? There were 50 of those guys. And I said, I thought I had an argument. I said, tell me, why do you want line 3? And their union leader said, well, we want it because of the jobs. So I thought I was a clever boy and I could come up with a response. I thought, oh boy, I've got him now. I got him right where I want him. I said, well, solar and renewable energy is providing 10 times the number of jobs that this pipeline will. He was quiet for a long 15 seconds, and he looked at me and he said, we want those jobs too. And what I had done is I'd walked into the dominant narrative, which is jobs in the economy trump everything else. So you have to be able to, I would have been better off with an argument that said, I understand that you want jobs, but my grandson has asthma and I've only lost him twice. And I can't allow this pollution to damage the health of Minnesotans, and pivoted to a health narrative that way. Because as soon as I go with more jobs or better jobs or anything else, we never question jobs. Jobs is a frame that we accept. So I'm sorry, George, I didn't
Oh,
mean
that's,
to
that's
No, no,
perfect though,
No,
because you went into you went into a different frame, and you got out of their frame, and you found another frame, and based on your values. And the other thing you said was treaty rights. Would we be breaking treaties if we built this?
Well, Fred, you know a little bit more about that, but that is correct, right?
Based on the fact that the proposed route goes through the largest natural wild ricing area in the world,
Hmm.
and the treaties are commit us to commit us as the US government, commit us to protecting those natural resources for Native people. The other safety issue is that Enbridge already has a line 3. It's old, it's leaking, it's not up to capacity. So they have very cleverly turned it around and said the new line is because we're so concerned about the environment and we don't want to have to continue to use the old leaking line. So
They're trying to go into the safety frame and the health frame by saying we need a new line because the one we have now is leaking and it's polluting.
right, and that we can't possibly replace that line. Which,
another false choice, but yeah.
Which
I would
actually,
say you don't get you back to Hobie's point. If you get the pipeline jobs, you don't get the wind turbine jobs. They traded 1 for 10. I mean, you could have come right back to him and said he's traded 1 for 10. He's not. I would have stayed on the jobs issue. I would have stayed on the jobs one and said you're not getting both.
So let me ask a question about because
Incorrect.
Logically you're right, but emotionally you're wrong. Sorry,
Thank you.
it doesn't work.
with the old line and new line, what we saw there is that their message was the new line is safer, and it's also an example, as was stated, of a way to put bait out there to keep you in their frame, right? Now on the wild rice part, what is it? What is the message that they have when they're challenged about running the pipeline through the largest wild rice area in the world? What I'm trying to draw out are what are the words they're using? What are the frames that they're in? We're in the stop phase now.
we have excellent relations with the tribes. We are aggressively recruiting Native workers. Let's see, I don't know. We're building the safest line possible using the latest technology. They refuse to admit that the pipeline is going to leak at all. So there's no danger from their perspective. To also, somehow, they totally ignore what construction is going to do. I mean, I'm not quite sure how they're going to put a pipeline through wild rice beds and not damage the wild rice beds. I mean,
That's actually what I thought would damage them, is the actual construction of building this thing through there. I never even took the next step to think that the destruction would be from the pipeline leaking, although I don't know why we wouldn't think it would, because the old one's leaking. So unless they think their technology is so much better now, but I know it is I just assumed it was the construction that would destroy the wild rice fields.
Could I try something, George?
Mm-hmm.
So they've framed this argument about safety. How would we frame it so that they would have to deny the fact that it leaks? I would like nothing better than Enbridge to say, our pipeline won't leak. Because what that'll do is that'll put into the mind of every Minnesotan the fact that it, pipeline leak. It's like denial is the one that, grabs onto you. So one way to do that is, again, to look for another narrative. And one narrative we have in Minnesota, again, it's a slightly conservative narrative, but again, I think this is also an urban versus rural. It's an urban progressive environmental against rural, because it's people in the state legislature and people, in rural Minnesota. We have a heritage, and I'll try it like this. In Minnesota, we have a strong heritage in protecting our environment. We like to hunt and fish. We understand this change of seasons. We appreciate our clean water, our clean air, and our lakes. There's no way we're going to allow a violation of our air and water for a foreign pipeline. Now, I've used foreign in there, but what I'm trying to do is bring the heritage and protection thing to us so that, or I could even say, we don't want pipelines leaking into our water. Let's let them defend that. So heritage is another one. Health is another, the one I mentioned before. The one you're mentioning about the rice beds, to me, is a climate justice narrative. So I would say we protect our land regardless of the color of our skin, where we come from, or what's in our wallets, because we know that protecting our environment is good for our children in Minnesota.
You can also talk about community, because
community there,
people all over the state, it's not just folks in the who use their wild rice fields, it's every community that the pipeline goes through, but it's also every community in the nation, if not the world, because these old ways of doing energy transport are damaging to the entire environment. It affects everyone. So you can move into those frames too. What I heard, just to do a quick recap, what we did is we determined we went through the stop phase. What are people saying? What are the frames? And we came up with the two big ones. It was jobs and safety. The frames that conservative or the pipeline people are using. Those are the ones that they want to focus on. And there's nothing wrong with jobs. There's nothing wrong with safety. But we can take those back. And like Hobie's saying, let's turn this back around. And when they say safety, we say, are you saying pipelines don't leak? And defend that. Sometimes we have to take a frame back if it's one that works for us. Safety and protection are locked together, and there's no reason why we shouldn't use those frames also. In fact, ours can be louder. I really liked the pipelines leak, which I think is a two-word way to just say to be repeating as often as you can. Work it into your conversation, because every time that's repeated, the first time it's said, there's a couple of brain cells, the pipeline and the leak brain cells join up together and make a connection. Then when you say it again, that connection gets stronger and stronger and stronger every time it's repeated, to the point where whether people agree with you or not, that whole idea, when people think of pipelines, they're going to think of leaks. That's the repetition part of framing that is so important, because you are literally building neural connections, making them stronger as you say your words. And you may repeat the same thing or show a picture of a pipeline leaking or finding other ways to put that in there. And then Hobie's very good at this stuff. He has, there are so many frames in here: heritage, protection. I got fulfillment out of that, which was the fact that our grandchildren will have a place there where they can live in a healthy life and be fulfilled. That's a big one. Clean and healthy is in there. And then two of them which sound negative, and it's not it's not like you should never ever use what may be seen as negative. The word violation in regards to what you were asking the governor to do, that is a good word to use, because that's what you're setting up is violation. You're setting up a frame of there is right here and there is wrong, and the right is being violated by the wrong. So that's the core of morals. And then foreign, which I thought was interesting to just throw in there too, because there are people who will you don't want to be xenophobic and push that on there. You may pull that out if you have some really, it's almost not really using it with integrity in a way, in that doing that is much more of a put down on people who are foreign or whatever.
We don't, it also goes against the liberal value of inclusiveness. You're creating an other someplace.
The world is our community.
Yeah. But I also if there's not an equity frame in there as well, when you talk about running this through the rice field, the wild rice fields, and the equity and going back to how poorly we've treated Native peoples and indigenous peoples in this country, and look at what we're looking at doing is running this right through their land. I'm assuming it's their land. I don't know if it's protected by treaty. I'm not understanding if it is or not, but it's still wrong to take away something that belongs to them and is part of their culture and heritage.
So we did.
Actually, that's an interesting point, because they have routed it to keep it off of Indian land, but to put it through land that is protected by the treaty rights. Okay. Is my understanding of the situation.
Such a subtle little differentiation there, but still it's wrong. It's like putting 94 through the Rondo neighborhood. It's right. Like, it maybe there was some legalities and all kinds of stuff. I'm sure they worked through all of that, but what it did is it destroyed a neighborhood. So, so there's equity issues in a lot of these things too.
There's also the counter economic argument that the 5 or 6 counties in north central Minnesota that the line would go through contribute far more to the Minnesota economy per year than the pipeline will ever do. And it provides more jobs than the pipeline will ever provide. It will, and the pipeline, actually, permanent jobs is something like, what, 34, 35 jobs?
As many as 36.
Wow.
And yeah, for the construction, for the 18 months, 2 years of construction, there'll be, I don't know, maybe 1,200 or 1,800 jobs, but for 1 or 2 years. Whereas the whole economy of that region, based on the quality of the environment and the water, provides many more jobs and many more dollars to the economy. Now, I don't.
Again,
you're getting back into the logical rational.
I think you're walking right into the economic one, and you actually gave their answer, which is the pipeline only provides 34 permanent jobs, and they're going to go, but we're providing 1,200 jobs for the next 2 years and bringing tens of millions of dollars to Minnesota communities. Now I'm in an argument, no, you're not, yes, you are. And I'd be better off with a pipeline leaks frame than I would. And so one of the stop things is, am I using a reason or a fact to try and counter an argument, or am I actually framing this the way I want it to be framed? Another frame that we could use is, there is the climate justice, and Lisa's talking about the aspect of the Native American tribes. I'm a little skeptical that that's a very effective one, because we can use it. There's something called the race class narrative, and we can say we need to do X, Y, or Z regardless of the color of our skin. You know, in Minnesota, we come together regardless of the color of our skin, where we're from, or what's in our wallets. That's a positive statement that can be attached to things. But I've seen it in South Dakota with the Dakota Access Pipeline. And quite frankly, it is an egregious climate justice injustice. But it didn't make any difference because the people that are so marginalized, they didn't have any power. So saying that the people of Standing Rock were being victimized really didn't have much influence. What I would have said is, I could have used a different one, which goes back to the pollution one, which is, in Minnesota, we're the land of 10,000 lakes and 5,000 rivers. Our water is sacred. We are stewards of the water. It's our obligation to make sure that our water is clean and pure for all of us, regardless of whether we are harvesting wild rice, fishing on our lakes, or making moonshine in our backyards, whatever it is. But I'm going to take a sacredness approach to it, and a inclusive race class narrative when I describe that.
We've all heard, I think, the term the water protectors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's what you're talking about there.
That's a good frame, water protectors. I think it's kind of limited, but it is a good frame, yes.
So let me point out here something that is interesting, because we didn't bring it up in the stop phase, but this is a key to figuring out a lot of times where your opponent's weakest point is, because one of the most common propaganda tricks to use is projection. And so, thinking about the jobs and safety or protection, these are frames that, the value frame of protection is huge on the liberal side. And jobs, it's people's well-being, it's the way they get along. Jobs are important. And they use, I'm thinking that they're using those, as so often is the case, because those are their greatest weaknesses. They know they're not going to have a lot of jobs. They know, so they're going to talk about how many jobs it has, or talk about bringing jobs here. They know they're weak. They know that, as Phil said, there's 10 times more jobs in solar, if not more than that. They're going to do that. And then when it comes to safety, they know that that's their weakest point, that those pipelines are not safe because they leak, and they let them go for years and years, like the old one, and don't do the needed repairs to make sure that it stays online and is safe. So they project that onto us, and they'll try to say that, well, in a way, our new pipeline is safer. And so they want to portray themselves as being interested in safety. They want you to associate safety and protection with them. And that takes away from the safety and protection we should be talking about when we talk about the environment. And then let me get back to, I think Frederick said, so what kind of logic can you use on this? I'm kind of jumping here to another spot. And there's a kind of logic, I call it toddler logic. So think about what happens, some of you had grandchildren, and all of us, probably have had kids. What do kids say when they want to know something and you give them an answer? What's their first response to your answer?
Why?
Okay, and then you go, Dad, why are you buying that grass seed? Well, because the backyard's got a bare spot. Well, why does it have a bare spot? Well, it's because somebody spilled something out there and it killed the grass. And well, why did that happen? They just keep asking why and why. If you keep asking why you care about this issue, just stop and put the facts and the logic aside and just say, why do I care about not having this pipeline? Why do I care? What's going on here? And the more times you ask, whatever answer you come up with, say why again. and see what happens and what other answer you can come up with. The more you do that, the closer you get to basically a value, to a real core value of why you want things to be a certain way. I mean, we really, when it gets down to it, we want our grandchildren and all people in the future to have a safe place to live. We want to, so that is really getting core value. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And Jason, you had a question?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I do a lot of training at Cummins as an engineer, and we do what's called the 3P5Ys analysis. And what we get to is what's called, and I'm borrowing this actually from a different group, I won't get into the irreducible complexity, which is, so like just to give your example in a context of how I train it, my car won't start. Well, why? Well, the battery is dead. Well, if we stop there and we replace the battery, okay, fine, but now if we ask why again, well, the alternator belt broke, which means replacing the battery doesn't fix the issue. It does as a short-term solution, but you're not even going to get to the grocery store. Well, why did the alternator belt break? Well, it turns out that it was driven beyond its lifetime, and why did that happen? Because the guy didn't do proper maintenance, and then that's your root cause. So we have these things called root causes, and I don't want to make, I know we're not supposed to get technical on these conversations, but
That was
like
great.
this kind of rules the roost in engineering terms too, which is you keep asking why until you kind of strike this goal. What I like to call irreducible complexity. Once you can't ask why and get a better answer, now you've kind of found something that you work with, and that's sort of your golden egg that you can start bringing, doing what Hobie's doing, which is kind of painting over that egg to make it a little bit more consumable by a general public situation. But I love that you do that because I've been training on the 3P5Y analysis for like 10 years, and it's interesting to see that it actually applies in this situation as well.
Yeah, I used to work at General Mills, and that was one of the tools we used to for continuous improvement.
Yeah, very common, right?
Even
what's
the post
interesting is
office
these
does
things-
that. Root cause forms.
Yep. Because, I mean, think about it. In these companies, over the years, they've learned, I mean, if you don't do that, it costs a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also have happier customers, better quality product if you do that. And so some of that is what we need to do on our side. We don't think about it as much, but we keep asking why. And you will not only come up with a real core moral value, you probably come up with the real issue also. You'll break out of what the conservative issue is or the pipeline issue. You break out of that because you're really delving down into why you care about things. And so I think that's a great metaphor, by the way, or analogy, going for the motor and the battery thing.
So speaking of value, I mean, the reason we state we don't need the Department of Commerce said the pipeline wasn't needed because it was a waste of money and a waste of resources. So we would say pipeline wastes money, resources, and by the way, my electric car puts out no emissions, and the pipeline is a pipeline for emissions because we call it pipeline for emissions. Am I getting back into the logic side?
Pipeline. Well, but it's an interesting way to, I kind of like a pipeline to emissions or a pipeline,
Of
pipeline
emissions.
to emissions, because what's interesting is now you have the emissions, or at least a pipeline to pollution, a pipeline to destruction. So you're on
Pipelines to waste.
a pipeline to waste. Yeah. Now you're associating all of those things with the pipeline. Pipelines leak. They're a pipeline to destruction. They're a pipeline to waste.
Don't let it be a pipeline for corruption of politicians.
Yeah.
See, there we go. See,
I was gonna come back to what Malia was saying. I think some of these deal with the whole aspect of the pipeline. She had a more specific thing she was asking. She was asking, how do we frame, what should we be saying to the governor in the next 2 days? Because the idea is he needs to allow the Department of Commerce to extend the I don't know what the legal thing is, extend the,
It's something about refiling for an appeal.
yeah, refiling for an appeal. That's what we want to do. So
That's the one.
that's a much narrower thing than the thing we've been talking about. All of these are good frames, but within the next couple of days, the question is, who's the audience? Well, it's the governor and his staff. It is any public pressure that you can put on them. But then the question becomes, what is the governor's position? And he's been very cagey about it. He hasn't been exactly forthright all the time. That's why I came back and said, have the courage to do this to protect Minnesota.
And what is the actual what?
Good question. He needs to allow the Department of Commerce to extend the appeals process, or refile the appeals process.
Yeah, it's refiling the process.
Yeah.
They have to have his permission to do that?
Pardon?
Do they have to have his permission
They
to
have
do
to
that?
act, it's a legal process, they have to refile. My Sierra Club text this morning was tell him to continue the Line 3 pipeline appeal.
Continue
Update?
to allow the Line 3 pipeline appeal?
Yeah,
Yep.
they have to refile the appeal.
I'm thinking, why is that important that he does that?
Otherwise it stops and they get their permit.
And why does that matter?
Well, because then the line goes forward.
And if it goes forward, what happens?
Well, it's going to leak.
I mean, you see where I'm going. I keep on.
I do, George.
But Hobie's got an interesting angle on this because, framing is both tactical, which is what you need right now, tactical on this very specific situation right now. And it's also strategic. And think about the fact that on the left, we tend to be tactical all the time. That's what we do. We have an election to win. What do? We turn people out to vote. We get volunteers to come in. Here in west part of the Minneapolis metro, it is the hottest spot in the nation for voter turnout and for voter contact. The 3rd Congressional District and Senate District 44 in particular are the tops in the nation for this. That's what we do. But if we'd never, that's great. But it's like we know how to win battles, but we don't know how to win the war. So let me just say to you that your message to the governor would be a lot easier if the frames that we've been talking about here have been laid down over a period of years. If we'd been doing this value framing first. Now we've laid a foundation. It's not a weird concept for the governor or anybody else to associate the pipeline with danger and with waste and with pollution. But if we did that all, I mean, we're doing that, but we're doing it in a way, I mean, we're saying those things, but we're saying in a way that, quite frankly, a lot of times causes people's eyes to glaze over. And they don't, and because if you say why you care, think about the voter or the, in this case, the governor, but you can have a conversation about facts and about what's really happening. You can argue about that ad nauseum, but a lot of people can't do that. A lot of people don't have time. A lot of voters, I mean, everybody has a busy life, a complex life. Things happen. I know we had stuff happen in our family, took us out for a year pretty much. And, but everybody can have a values conversation about what's right and wrong about that pipeline. And you talk about the belching factories, and that lays that down there, and everybody can talk to you about that and say what's right or wrong about leaky pipelines polluting things. Again, that's the strategic part. The tactical part right now, I think that's it. It's harder, but I think you still can use some of the same things. I mean, in this case, if you don't do that, we don't have the chance to protect. If you don't make this or if you don't sign the
Refile the appeal.
you don't refile the appeal. Thank you. Then we will have lost our chance to protect ourselves and protect our environment and protect our people. And we will have safety issues all the way we have a dangerous pipeline, and there's nothing we, the citizens, can do about it. We need you, Governor Wallace, to have the courage, as Hobie says, to
That
make
could do
this happen
permanent
so
damage.
we can have what citizens can get what they need.
What, Melody?
And damage to the water supply is pretty permanent. It's something that's really difficult to reverse, if at all.
Oh, but it's a safe pipeline.
Sure it is.
It will never leak, ever.
The other, to George's point, the one thing I like to say is, what does a copper nickel sulfide mine in the boundary waters, Line 3, and giant hog farms have in common?
Water pollution.
Could be water pollution, but
A lot of
why is it that we must fight each of these as separate issues? And that's to George's point of being strategic. If we had a base in Minnesota that understood the values behind protection of the environment and our connection to the earth, then the next time somebody came up, like frac sand mining or whatever it is, it would be much easier to deal with that. So this is the thing that he's saying about working between the issues, between elections, to develop and cultivate the values. And part of that is framing. And, you know, Minnesota is kind of a purple state. We have the ability to go one way or the other. And we should be working in between the elections as well to frame environmental issues so that we don't have to play whack-a-mole and get the next one. What is it going to be? You know,
Which,
hunting songbirds on our backyard. You know, I don't know what it is. It's going to be some stupid issue that some special interest wants to do that will destroy our environment. And people are going to go, oh, I don't care. That doesn't matter to me. But it does if we connect it to our core values. And to me, it's the respect for the dignity of life that underlies a lot of this. All life, the life of the boundary, you know, the wildlife in the boundary waters, the lives of the people whose livelihoods depend on it, our First Nations who harvest their sacred wild rice. We need to build that up as a story that we tell year round. Sorry to preach.
no, that's
No, that totally makes sense, right? Because I could see like, well, that pig farm, that doesn't bother me. You know, I live in Brooklyn Park and that's up in, you know, somewhere far away. Who cares? But right, if it's all tied in together as part of an overall bigger strategy around our environment and the protection of it, then that totally makes sense.
Malia, do you feel you have something to say to the governor now?
Well, I think so. I think I can put something together. But am I going to repeat it right here? No, I need to write it down.
Actually, I want to send something to the governor now too. So I've been writing things down too.
Oh, you want his number? You got his number, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, and you know what's interesting is you do that with the governor on a very specific issue. The rest of us, in what we should never call the off years between elections, because that's our time when we have time to be strategic. You know, the closer we get to the election, the more tactical we have to become. But we need to spend these times after the election until the next one, working very, very hard to be strategic, getting these messages out there and finding ways that we can get more and more people to understand the concepts we've been talking about. Because if everybody gets it, if the Sierra Club gets it, and Isaac Walton League gets it, and, you know, I don't know what all the others are, you know, various environmental groups get it, the electric car people, all these folks are getting back to those core values and making messages from that and understanding how to stay out of the common opponent's frames. Now where everybody's working together, everybody's doing the same thing. And going back to the example of the marriage amendment, the core frame on that was love. And what was interesting is that a number of groups got together, Richard Carbaum and Denise Cardinal, Alliance for Better Minnesota, and the DFL and a number of other groups got together and they sat down. They said, here's what we're going to say, and here's what everybody's going to do. And so we didn't duplicate effort, but the messaging was consistent across those, and it worked. It worked really well. And so we all, you know, if we can take those core values that are on that list or on the card, if you were at the workshop, and you can basically almost on any issue, you can use almost every one of those values in a different message. And by doing that, every time we use those in messages, no matter what the issue is, not only does that issue get a message, but the core values get built. The idea of having protection lighting up in people's brains when we talk about our issue will not be such an alien concept. It'll be something that people accept.
Looks like we have hit 8.
What's that?
I said, it looks like we have hit 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we don't have any other questions, I don't want to hold everybody here because I know there are speeches and things that we want to go have a beer and watch. So,
and we will, and this was actually really good. This was, thank you, Malia, for having this topic at the ready. And I think we had a great discussion about it that showed how to stop, drop, and roll. I mean, we were kind of all over the place, but we did it. So I agree. So appreciate that. Thank you.
And your homework is, whenever you slip into facts and logic, stop yourself and say, why do I care? And just use your toddler logic and keep going. See how far it takes you and where it leads you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Tell other people. We do this every Monday night. Get them in. And
told the Environmental Caucus, and I guess I need to forward them a link to to your site so they specifically see it.
yeah, and give us a little, you know, Phil Adams says, these guys are great.
One question on that, George, if I do forward this, because this seems to be sort of building off of previous things, like, do you find this is enough to, like, people can kind of come in halfway through and not lose anything from behind? Or should there be a background for some that come in late?
Two things. I'm intentionally trying to repeat the core concepts at various points in these. So if you stay through 3 or 4 of them, you'll hear a lot of the same stuff. And then also, if people want to, they can go back and watch the videos on the website. They can do that.
Good point. Good
and
point.
we are trying to keep these, I mean, what are the ones you might have coming up, please?
Well, now you put me on the spot.
Okay, I put her on the spot.
I'll look it up here super quick. You keep talking.
And Lisa will send out an email, and we have some upcoming topics. But I'm trying to keep this practical. Actually, the closer we get to the election, probably mid-September, really going to focus more on a lot of nuts and bolts. So talk about GOTV. We'll talk about phone banking, because that's what we have now as far as direct person-to-person voter contact is phone banking. We don't have door knocking. So some of these things will just be practical organizing things, but also, you know, how do you keep a new phone banker from being too wigged out about phone banking, too shy about it? Have them talk about right and wrong, and they don't have to be into all the facts. They don't. What you're worried about as a phone banker is, what if the voter asks me something I can't answer? Well, you could probably come up with a reason why you care about that issue. And you and the voter probably will both be relieved that you don't have to know all of the facts and all the nitty gritty. You can talk about right and wrong. So.
Okay, so next Monday is messaging with integrity, the importance of honesty, authenticity in your values-based messaging. August 31st is know your opposition. Learn to identify the most common tricks and propaganda of your opposition. And no workshop on Monday, September 7th, because that's Labor Day. And then we will be coming up with some topics for September. If you have any ideas, let us know. I will be sending out a survey to everybody who's taking these framing and action workshops so far. If you registered through Eventbrite, then you're on the mailing list. And so one of the questions will be, if you have any ideas for topics, let us know.
And we want to do some special events too. So I think we mentioned before, I want to get Hobie in and we do one that's environmental and hear more about some of the really, truly insightful things that Hobie has. And then there are some other folks that we've who have agreed to do this too. So that they may be special events. So we'll let you know those as they start to come together.
Awesome.
Jan, anything to say from Michigan?
No, I learned a lot. I mean, we have line 5, so you have line 3.
Oh,
we
okay.
have
Okay.
line 5.
All right.
So we're working with that too. So it was very good. It was very informative. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, folks, go watch the convention.
Yep.
Thanks and good
All
night.
right. Bye, everybody.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. connectionslab.org. connectionslab.org.